So what happens when a multi-million peso shipment just vanishes into thin air? We're about to dive into a real-world legal thriller that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And it all boils down to one crucial question. When things go wrong, who's ultimately on the hook? Okay, picture this. You're waiting on a huge, valuable delivery of aluminum. But then you get that dreaded call. Half of your shipment, worth over 2 million pesos, is just gone. This isn't a movie plot, you know? This is exactly what happened to a company called Honda Trading, right here in the Philippines. And that immediately brings up the big question, right? When something this valuable gets stolen, who pays for it? Is it the owner, the shipping company, the guy driving the truck? The answer? Well, it's way more complicated than you think. And that's the puzzle we're going to piece together today. Our story actually kicks off not in some stuffy courtroom, but with a high-stakes, dramatic hijacking right on the streets of Manila. So let's trace the journey of these lost ingots. Just look at how fast this all went down. The cargo lands on November 3rd. Just 5 days later, it's cleared and on its way. But in that last critical mile between the port and the warehouse, bam, disaster strikes. One of the trucks gets ambushed, the cargo is swiped, and the only thing they ever find is the empty container, just ditched near a cemetery. The speed of it is it's wild. And let that number sink in for a second. Over 2.1 million pesos. I mean, that's not chump change. It's a huge financial hit. And you can bet someone was going to have to pay for it. So, to figure out who's responsible, we have to follow the paper trail and untangle this messy web of contracts. See, in modern shipping, it's never just one company. It's a whole chain of people. And that's exactly where things start to get tricky. So here's how the chain of service worked. At the top, you've got Honda Trading, the owner. They hire a company called Keihin Everett to handle all the logistics. But, and this is really the key part, Keihin Everett doesn't do the driving themselves. They subcontract that final, crucial leg of the journey to another company, Sunfreight. And these three companies, they're the core of this entire legal fight. But wait, there's a fourth player here, kind of operating behind the scenes, the insurance company. See, Honda was insured by Tokio Marine. Now, they're the ones who pay for the loss at first, but you know they're going to want to get that money back from whoever was actually at fault. And this is where the legal blame game really kicks off. Tokio Marine pays Honda's claim, then they immediately turn around and sue the logistics companies to get their money back. But as this case started winding its way through the lower courts, it became pretty clear this wasn't going to be a simple open and shut case. And you can see the legal tug of war right here. The first court, the RTC, said both companies were basically in it together. They were jointly and severally liable. But then the Court of Appeals saw it differently. They said, no, it's more like dominoes. Keihin Everett has to pay first, and then they can go after Sunfreight to get reimbursed. It might sound like a tiny difference, but believe me, in legal terms, that is a huge deal. Well, Keihin Everett was not happy with that. So they decided to go all in. They took their case to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court of the Philippines. This was it, their last shot. The final word was about to be written. So Keihin Everett came out swinging. They threw a bunch of legal technicalities at the wall, stuff about the insurance policy and who had the right to sue. But their main argument, their big knockout punch, was pretty simple. They basically said, hey, hold on a minute. How is this our fault? We weren't even driving the truck. Our subcontractor Sunfreight was the one who lost it. Now, this whole case really hinges on one of these fancy legal terms, subrogation. It sounds complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It just means the insurance company gets to step into the shoes of its client. So once Tokio Marine paid Honda, they legally inherited Honda's right to sue whoever was at fault. This concept is the key that unlocks this entire case. So how did the Supreme Court settle this? They didn't get bogged down in all those technicalities. Nope. They went right back to a fundamental principle in the law, a rule that says common carriers, which is basically any company that moves goods for the public, are required to observe extraordinary diligence. But what on earth does that actually mean? Let's break it down because this is important. Extraordinary diligence isn't just about being careful. It is the absolute highest possible level of care you can imagine. The law says that from the second you take those goods to the moment they are safely in the hands of the receiver, they are 100% your responsibility. There are no excuses. The job just isn't done till it's done. And that right there, that was the knockout blow to Keihin Everett's whole argument. The Supreme Court's logic was crystal clear. Your duty of extraordinary diligence doesn't just vanish because you handed the keys to somebody else. Honda's contract was with Keihin Everett, not Sunfreight, and that's where the responsibility ultimately stops. All right, so let's break down the final outcome. The Supreme Court laid out a super clear chain of liability, showing exactly how this whole thing was going to be settled.
First up, step 1. Honda Trading, the owner, gets made whole. Their insurance company, Tokio Marine, pays the claim for the full 2.1 million peso loss. So for Honda, the story is over.
Okay, step 2. The court turns to Keihin Everett and says, you have to pay that insurance company back. Thanks to subrogation and that all-important duty of extraordinary diligence, the court made it clear. Keihin Everett was on the hook to reimburse Tokio Marine. And finally, step 3, the last piece of the puzzle. The court also said that Keihin Everett now has every right to go after their subcontractor, Sunfreight, to get all of that money back. So the ultimate financial hit lands on the company that physically had the cargo when it disappeared. So what's the big takeaway from all this? Why does it matter? Well, this ruling reinforces a really important protection for all of us. The law sets this incredibly high bar for shipping companies because, let's face it, they're handling the lifeblood of our economy. It means that when you hire a company to move your stuff, they are responsible, period. They can't just pass the buck to some other company you've never even heard of. In this case, even though it's legally settled, it kind of leaves us with a bigger question for our modern world, doesn't it? In today's crazy complex supply chains, with dozens of companies and thousands of miles separating a product from its owner, where does responsibility truly end? And that's a question that's only going to get more complicated from here.